G'day guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Wildkard. Thank you for being here watching my content and giving me the pleasure and the absolute privilege to talk about the greatest sport in the world, rugby. And you are here today because it's Tuesday and it's time to read some rugby news. First up, the fallout from the Eddie Jones appointment, the sacking of Dave Rennie in Australia, has been, just a little bit more details has revealed last week by the CEO himself. Hamish McLennan was in the interview last week, and he revealed that the decision to sack Dave Rennie was done without the involvement of the players. So yeah, really mind-boggling, really poor management. He basically revealed that this was done by the board, and the board voted unanimously to fire Dave Rennie, obviously due to his poor winning record, and they voted unanimously to hire Eddie Jones. Now, there's nothing, the fact that the board made the decision is pretty normal, but it's the players that makes up the team. It's really important to have the players involved in this sort of situations and at least have someone representing, like maybe the captain representing the team, have a say in this decision. But yeah, obviously Rugby Australia thinks they own the team. They probably think they still play the game. They probably think that they're more important than the players, right? So they made the decision on behalf of the players to fire Rennie without consultation. Now Dave Rennie is heavily respected amongst the players. Alan Alatoa and a lot of the players has spoken in the past about how much they respected him. So yeah, really, it is really a bit of a, it shows just a lot of arrogance and a lot of managerial issues in the Rugby Australia. And we'll talk about some managerial issues going forward as well. So I have nothing against Eddie Jones being fired in place of the decision itself. It's just the way the decision was made is really poor. If we were to look at the All Blacks, the players were involved in Ian Foster keeping his job as the All Blacks head coach. Last year, he had the full backings of the players when the All Blacks were running into those losing kind of situations in the start of the season. And with the backing of the players was probably a large part of the decision that resulted in Ian Foster keeping his job with the All Blacks, because it is a team, right? It involves players as well. Whereas Rugby Australia, don't think that's an issue. Now, let's delve a little bit further into this issue. Obviously, more people from across the pond are not happy. Israel Dag, another person, came out, thought the treatment was inhumane against Dave Rennie, and he did feel like the decision was outlandish, and he did call for McLennan to be fired, because he also related back to the incident last year when McLennan saying that they're going to pull out of Super Rugby to try to get themselves a better profit split in the Super Rugby with New Zealand, which they did succeed to do so. So from a business point of view, yes, the Rugby Australia did manage to get extract more money from New Zealand out of the Super Rugby deal. But in terms of just being a person, really not the greatest person to be with, to be honest. So Israel Dag has called him out on that as well. Now, going in a little bit further now, the Hamish McLennan also confirmed that the Ghetto law, which has been modified in recent times due to COVID, to allowing 3 overseas players being eligible to play for the Wallabies, will remain in place. There were some speculations that with Eddie Jones especially, the limitation will be removed or be increased, which has not. McLennan basically said that's not going to be the case. They will still remain 3 only. This has been already modified from the previous rule where a player had to play 60 test matches to be qualified for the Wallabies if you were to reside overseas. But yeah, this is already a modification on top of that. And his reasoning, get this, his reasoning for committing to the Ghetto's law, which in my opinion is just stupid, because South Africa has shown that the removal of regional restrictions has made the game much better in South Africa by winning the World Cup. So it's in a sense, it is a stupid law to begin with, a stupid rule to begin with. He has defended this by saying that they're doing it to help New Zealand rugby. The law as a commitment to New Zealand rugby to ensure that the standard of Super Rugby did not diminish and did not foresee any immediate changes. Yeah, he made sure to pin it on New Zealand Rugby as the reason why Australians are not able to be selected overseas. Yeah, sure. So anyway, Eddie Jones, already in charge of the Wallabies, obviously, is already doing great work for the Wallabies in my part, because one thing that the Eddie Jones wanted to achieve is to create more media buzz about rugby, about the Wallabies, and having people talking about the Wallabies from outside of the rugby sort of like circle, the rugby bubble. And one of the things that he wants to bridge into is the rugby league arena in Australia, obviously the biggest kind of rugby pie in Australia. He's already got them talking by declaring that he's interested in some of the NRL's rising stars. So the NRL boss, what's his name? NRL boss Peter V'landys has basically came out last week and talked about Eddie Jones' intentions and basically said, hey, why would anyone want to leave rugby league? It's the greatest game of all. Yeah, of all what? Of all time? Of all children? I don't know. Greatest game of all. Stealing my catchphrase there, by the way. So V'landys already, by mentioning Eddie Jones in the news under a bigger sporting banner, Eddie Jones is already winning the game that we kind of wanted to see for Rugby Australia, just creating that media buzz. He's already able to succeed in doing so. So Eddie Jones, so Eddie Jones obviously had to respond to this, saying whatever. But yeah, just by creating this buzz, it's already a good thing. But the more important part about the Eddie Jones response here that I want to touch on is that Eddie Jones also had stated that he wanted to be more involving the players with the grassroots rugby. This is when I saw this, I was like, I was so happy when I read this. I actually can't believe, even if Eddie Jones don't win anything, just doing what he's saying here already makes me hopeful for the future of Australian rugby, right? So one of the things that Eddie Jones did when he was visiting Australia in July is that he made the England team go out and visit the public. So he made the England team visiting schools, clubs, public areas to interact with the fans, whereas the Wallabies stayed in the resort in the Gold Coast for the training camp. Yeah, this is something that the Wallabies, I don't think have ever done in the past. As far as I'm a rugby fan, I don't know if the Wallabies ever did this. When I was in school, I literally went to a school that funneled what's called basically consider one of those funneling schools that puts players into the Super Rugby into the Wallabies. There was a time where half the Wallabies team I played against at some point as a kid, right? That's how many people that we have in our competition that gets funneled into the Wallabies. At my school, the Wallabies has never visited my school. Whereas, get this, the All Blacks has come and visited me, my team, at training to say hi to us, to take a photo with us. The All Blacks did, and the Wallabies never showed up. So it's been appalling for Rugby Australia in this regard. And Eddie Jones has, just sending England to visit Australian schools, it's already just doing a million times better than what Rugby Australia is doing at the moment. And by the way, at the Gold Coast training, at the Gold Coast camp, this is not like Dave Rennie don't want to, just get the players distracted. This is just Dave, the way that Rugby Australia has been functioning for the last, 10, 20 years maybe. So it's been horrendous. Rugby Australia has been doing in terms of grassroots rugby. So Eddie Jones getting the Wallabies out there, getting involved in get the players to visit the schools, to visit the public is the first step and probably the most important step to getting Australian rugby back on track once again. So I'm already happy. Eddie Jones, even if he gets eliminated in pool stage Rugby Australia in the World Cup, I don't care. He's already done more than I could ask for. That's just, anyway. Thank you, England, once again, for firing Eddie Jones. And anyway, moving on. Alan Alatoa has re-signed with Australia for 2027. He did come out again, kind of reiterated what I just mentioned, that he was surprised that Dave Rennie was sacked. He had a lot of respect for Dave Rennie. And again, Rugby Australia not knowing how to conduct business appropriately. Hopefully Eddie Jones replaces all of them at some point. And anyway, some really, I guess real news that trickled out of Rugby Australia last week. Kurtley Beale has been arrested, or he's on bail at the moment. He's being charged with sexual assault over the Christmas period, and his wife has bailed him out, but he's been suspended by Rugby Australia until obviously cleared until the courts clear him of wrongdoings. But until then, he's been suspended for all rugby activities going forward. And basically, I'll try to dig up some information of exactly what happened. But basically, initially I thought this could be one of those things where people trying to this could be like, I thought maybe this, I didn't know what was because he's married, he had a new child. I thought this was a bit bizarre for him to go out and kind of do this sort of things. So regardless, it was revealed that there had been a recording. The police have a recording of a conversation that between Beale and the victim, and also Beale has sent a text to his friend afterwards saying that he messed up. He's out at a pub over the Christmas. So there seems to be some evidence that this did occur, and not looking good for Kurtley. He will be out of Rugby Australia for the foreseeable future. Anyway, let's moving on. So Warren Gatland has come out last week as well. He talked about the 60-man cap selection rule in Wales, which is pretty similar to the Giddels law from a few years before it was adjusted recently, that you have to have 60 caps for Wales before you're eligible to be selected if you don't play domestically in Wales. So Warren Gatland has come out and talked about with obviously the Welsh rugby currently struggling financially, with some of the players looking at overseas options. Will Rowlands is one of the players that left because the Welsh rugby union could not confirm a contractual agreement to the players for the current season. So I can understand why Gatland really wants this to be opened up for his own and the benefit of Wales. So obviously Wales has been Scott Baldwin has been recalled to Wales team after Lewis Lake being injured. So Wales already suffering a bit more of a bit more injury issues with a knee injury to Lewis Lake, and Scott Baldwin is stepping in for him for the Six Nations. Now moving on to Ireland. Ireland has announced their squad last week. Probably the biggest thing for the squad is Johnny Sexton has returned from a broken cheekbone. He had operations in the broken cheek on his face. So he had a broken cheekbone, but he's going to be okay and available to play for Ireland. Byrne, what's his name? Ross Byrne has been playing on his behalf, basically the number 10 jersey for Leinster, and he's been doing quite well. So I'm actually not going to be surprised if they try transition Byrne in position ahead of Johnny Sexton at some point, because I actually wouldn't be surprised if Johnny Sexton don't play in the first week against Wales, and Andy Farrell put Byrne in place to on his behalf. So because he was doing the Leinster is undefeated in the Champions Cup, and Burns has been playing on behalf of Johnny in the 10 jersey. So I would not surprised if Johnny Sexton don't actually play at all in the first game. And the Leinster, speaking of Leinster, Leinster lock Charlie Ryan has retired already at the age of 23 due to an ongoing knee injury. The rugby is really taking a toll on this man. 23, I mean, I feel like if he takes a couple of years off, he probably can come back. But anyway, at this point, he's announced his retirement. Next up, so Owen Farrell obviously had a red card, which was given a 4-week suspension a couple weeks ago, and he has to attend tackle training to reduce that down to 3. So as a result of the tackle training, Owen Farrell basically said that he's learned. And what did he learn? don't put yourself in a position that you can potentially make a high tackle in the first place. Yeah, nice. Anyway, let's move on. So yeah, obviously with that being said, the RFU, by the way, with the Saracens, right, there was a game that I watched where the Saracens played Edinburgh, and Saracens had like just high tackles everywhere. Like it was almost like they didn't know how to tackle low. Just like yeah, it's almost like they were trained to wrap around the chest. So there was with Jamie George as well getting hurt in the head as a result. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, there might be some tackling issues at Saracens specifically. So anyway, moving on. So with that being said, the RFU has come out last week stating a new rule that across all levels of amateur rugby, the tackle has to be around the waist or lower, so to protect head injury. So yeah, honestly, I don't know who came up with this. I don't know what research you did on this decision, RFU, because as far as just put all the logistics aside, like how you're gonna teach a child, like how is that gonna work with people coming out of a ruck or something and you have no time to duck? Is that just straight away a penalty? With all that aside, right, pretty sure like last week Steve Hansen has talked about this. Pretty sure most of the injuries occurs to the tackler than the person. The tackler suffers more injuries than the people getting tackled. And going low, it's like way more dangerous to go low for the tackler, because you're literally ramming your head into someone's legs and hips. So you're actually putting the tackler in a much more dangerous position with this rule, especially when you're talking about children, right? As a kid, you just want to hug someone for the tackle because, yeah, I don't know how this is gonna work. A lot of people are not happy with this. There's a bit of one of those internet, what do they call it? One of those internet forums or whatever. People are filling up to appeal the RFU to reconsider the decision. But yeah, this will happen starting from 1st of July. So you must tackle low, I guess. By the way, the one and only time I've ever been knocked out in rugby is getting kneed on the head going in for a low tackle. Okay, that's the only time I've ever been knocked out in rugby. And that's the way the RFU wants everybody to tackle in the amateur level. So I don't know if they actually done their research, to be honest. With that being said, obviously we talk about it's divided all over the world. Johnny Sexton himself has come out, talked against this. Andy Farrell, the head coach from Ireland, also came out and talked about this. He thinks that it puts the tackler in a more vulnerable position when they're going low, especially for a child. That's something basically I experienced personally when I got knocked out, going low onto someone's hips and slamming my head onto someone's leg or knee. I don't really remember what happened. I remember blanking out. I assume I got hit by the knee. But yeah, it is a more dangerous position for the tackler. But yeah, RFU decided that's the case going forward starting the 1st of July. So yeah, Nigel Owens obviously has something to say about this as well. He talked about the logistic part in terms of how the referee is gonna do this. There's just way too many questions of how to implement this. If Nigel Owens gave some examples, if a ball carrier is diving for the try line, is he just untouchable? Because it's basically impossible to tackle somebody waist high if they're diving for the try line, right? Is it just impossible to stop? You're guaranteed a penalty, right? If you dive the try line and they can't tackle you by the waist, how is that gonna work? So there's a lot of logistic stuff that happens, and Nigel Owens always also talked about how the coach is gonna deal with coaching this going forward. How is this gonna work coming out of a maul? Is a maul just gonna be illegal now if you try to hold someone up because you're technically not making a low waist load wrap around somebody if you're just wrapping someone by the chest to hold up for a maul? So there's so many logistic stuff that clearly the RFU has not been thinking through. Anyway, speaking of the England rugby, Courtney Lawes, again, someone that Eddie Jones had hopes for to be the captain of England rugby going to Rugby World Cup, has pulled out of the Six Nations due to a calf injury, and England has suffered a few more injuries as well. Jamie George, like I just mentioned, was knocked in the head as the tackler. He got basically the ball carrier rammed into him, head on head, rammed into him, basically knocked him out. He passed the initial concussion test after the incident, but yeah, he will be taking some time off for concussion assessment, so it could be after 12 days before he can return. So as of now, England rugby is missing a starting hooker, with Calvin Dickey still injured. Basically, England rugby is left if Jamie George could not return for the Scotland game. England is currently left with 2 debutants for the hooker position. So let's have a look at for the hooker position. Who are they? But anyway, so England is looking it's looking a little bit scary there, with basically potentially debuting a hooker against Scotland if Jamie George couldn't recover. Going out next is Henry Slade. He had a red card issued for this tackle you're seeing here on Kurtley Alensa. He at the time, the initial contact was around the shoulder, and the hand slipped up as Alensa kind of ducked himself under. And it was a wrongly given red card, as a lot of the pundits were speculating. So he has the red card scrapped as appealed, and he has been dismissed following the appeal. So England will be having him available for the Six Nations. So yeah, this is a little bit of an interesting thing in the Champions League. Just want a bit of incident in Champions League. So this incident here was a lot talked about with an Ibn Esbeth try. So what was happening is the Harlequins played the Sharks in the Champions League, and basically what was happening was this, like a caterpillar ruck like this. One of the South Africans bumped himself into the ruck and caused Joe Marler to loosen his arm in the caterpillar, and by dislodging his shoulder from the making contact with the player that's in front of him, as that basically made him not a part of the ruck when that happened, according to the law. So Ibn Esbeth, seeing that his shoulder is detached, runs over, picks up the ball, and scores a try. And after this, the Harlequins were complaining. The head coach came out and spoken about how this is not really talked about beforehand. I was not happy. I mean, it is part of the rule, but yeah, the Sharks clearly did their homework, knowing that something like this could happen, that they just simply sent this guy into the ruck, bumped the ruck, and Joe Marler's, sure enough, shoulder became undetached from the back of the ruck, and resulting in him not being part of the ruck anymore, and thus the ball is out of the ruck. Giving Ibn Esbeth a chance to go up and pick up the ball. So yeah, a really interesting incident happened on the weekend there. Also, the CJ Standard has returned to South Africa, and he has raised the issue of steroids use in schoolboy rugby. Now, this is in South African schoolboy rugby. This is something that even I knew when I was in school as a child, that the South African schoolboys does steroids. And there was some information that was released, what's called the Craven Week, and the number of people getting tested positive during the talent showcase in South Africa. It's just starting to get people testing positive during this Craven Week every year. So they had 3 players in 2017, 4 in 2016, 5 in 2015, 3 in 2014. So yeah, it is pretty well documented, and pretty, like, me as a kid on the other side of the world has heard about this from our coaches and stuff. It's no hidden secret that this has been an issue in South Africa, and CJ Standard has basically tried to shed more light on the issue. Makazolo Mapimpi has been banned for 2 weeks for accidentally putting, I think, his finger into a player's eye. He was cited after the game, and it was initially decided to be 4 weeks, but it was reduced down to 2 due to his clean records. So another player, Rufus McLean, has been suspended by Glasgow as a result of him, domestic abuse to his partner. And then we've got update on Stuart Hogg. Stuart Hogg had a heel injury, but he's currently on track to return potentially for the Six Nations openers match against England. He will be a really important part for the Scotland team if they wanted to beat England. Johnny Gray has been ruled out so far, still for Scotland with with an injury, so he has not played for his club, and as a result, Jamie Hodgson has been called in to replace him at the Scotland lineup. So finally, speaking of Scotland, Edinburgh has done a really good job beating the Saracens in the Champions Cup on the weekend, but there's a big but. They failed to get themselves ahead of the Saracens in terms of the overall rankings to secure a home elimination game. So as a result, basically, Edinburgh and the Saracens both finished on the same equal amount of points, but the Saracens have scored more tries, which means Saracens will still be ranked higher than Edinburgh, and as a result, the Saracens will get a home game and Edinburgh will get an away game against Leinster. So yeah, not really a good position to be in, and this was a massive confusion at the end of the game, as the play on the field, half the players on the field didn't really get the message that they need to score more points, need to score at least one more point to get the home elimination finals over the Saracens. So like some of the players knew, and then some players didn't know that was the case. The communication was not passed to the entire team. So one of the players got the ball, just kicked the ball out when Edinburgh really needed some additional points to secure that home final. So after it was kicked out, half the team was like celebrating, and the other half the team was just like shaking their heads like, oh my god, and the coaches were all like shaking their heads, and it was quite an awkward moment for Edinburgh. This was with Gregor Townsend watching on the sideline as well. So that's some interesting stuff. Anyway, that's the news for last week. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. With Six Nations coming up soon, we'll be upping the content a little bit, but always appreciate you watching this content. I'll see you guys next week. Cheers.